Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll first start with the approval of the November 4th, excuse me a second, the approval of the November 4th Reparations Committee meeting minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to look through?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any questions, edits, or comments? Perfect. Seeing none. All those in favor of passing the November 4th minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Our next item is, we have a number of discussion items. First, an update on the restorative housing program. Staff is seeking further direction from the committee in terms of next steps for the first 16 beneficiaries. We've had a number of discussions on that. Kimberly, do you want to kick it off, and then we'll...
I need to take this from the mayor. Sorry.
Yeah. All right.
Why don't we move forward to B, and that's easy enough to approve.
Yeah. All right.
Right.
Yeah. She's done this before, folks. All right, if you all can take a moment, we'll move to item B, which is approval of the 2022 meeting schedule. That's in the back here. Back on page 8. So pretty much the same time, the Thursdays, January through December. Any questions or comments on that? I'm sorry, did someone say something?
Move approval. Second.
It's been properly moved and
I'm sorry.
seconded. Yeah, that's all right. Okay. All those in favor of accepting the dates for 2022, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our meeting dates are confirmed. Next up, we have item 4A, which is the financial report. Is that you, Tashik?
Yes.
Perfect.
So as of November the 24th, the city received $31,510 to the reparations fund. Yeah, anything? No, nothing significant.
There's no action needed on that, right?
No, we're going to place it on file. I'm sorry, what was the dollar amount again?
31,500.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept and place this on file?
Move we accept the financial report and place it on file.
Is there a second?
Second.
Perfect. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, seeing none opposed, the motion passes. Next up, we have 4B, which is Evanston Community Wealth Day.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Is anyone here, Vanessa or anyone from Dearborn? If not, I can speak to it.
Please do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Turn up. I am so excited about Community Wealth Day. It is happening on Saturday.
Yes.
It's a long time coming. We had such great outcomes from Community Wealth Day in 2019, pre-pandemic. We had folks that left pre-approved for mortgages then. And this year, we have a financial institution that has committed to reparations with us that is going to make a really exciting announcement about a mortgage product that is available to reparation-eligible residents. So this is not just the original 16 that will be selected, but it is all reparation-eligible residents in Evanston will receive a special mortgage offer from Self-Help Credit Union. It is a nonprofit credit union that is nationwide, and they have a location on the south side of Chicago. So they are extending their service area to include the reparation eligible residents of Evanston with a special program. And so we do hope that you can come learn more about that. There will also be other housing policy experts and affordable housing advocates and many in the nonprofit space. But in addition to that, we'll have our Black real estate professionals that are there vending. They will be realtors and contractors and real estate attorneys and insurance agents, all Black. And our hope is that this Community Wealth Day is a place where we can begin to have a solidarity economic goal and support one another in business and use our reparation benefits and other benefits to grow wealth in the Black community. It is Saturday the 4th. It's all day long from 9 to 3. There is licensed childcare. And there's food. The food vendor is our very own Yo Fresh Yogurt. The lovely couple that's located on Chicago Avenue, please go there and support them. They will be providing lunch and snacks at the Community Wealth Day. It's at Faith Temple Church, if I didn't mention that, which is on Dewey. The exact address is, Ms. Lockhart, you probably know the exact address. They're your neighbor.
1932.
Yes. 1932 Dewey. And all are welcome. We hope that everyone attends, but we will be providing special products and services for our reparation eligible residents. I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
It's hosted and sponsored by Dearborn Realtors, which is the Chicago chapter of NARAB, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which is the nation's oldest Black real estate trade association. They were founded many years ago because they were not invited to be real estate professionals. I hope I got all of that right. And that's it. Any questions? Call Vanessa McCoy.
I don't know if she's here, but this is one of the things, and I just want to thank, I'll call you the Honorable Ambassador to Reparations, Sims, because, I mean, she started this work years ago, and so the first one went over with incredible success, and then during the community meetings, there were a number of questions around home ownership, and I want to say, and not characterize the whole sessions, but there was a question from an individual who was waiting for the repair to be issued before she started, and any of you who own a home or have gone through the process, it's something that does take some time. So this event, the resurfacing of this event was really due to a lot from the residents who participate in our community events. So whether you're a first-time homeowner, you're looking to refinance, or you're just looking to get into investment properties, I would encourage you all to attend, and please, please, please spread the word. It isn't very often that we have banks, institutions coming to our town, real estate agents, contractors, everyone in the same place. So if you have an interest in a property, if it's one of your goals for 2022, I'd strongly urge that you attend as well. Register, register, register. The information is out there, and if you have questions, I see Ms. McCoy, can you please raise your hand so people know that you're here? If you have any questions regarding the event, please see Mrs. Vanessa McCoy, who is working very closely.
I do have a question.
Please.
For persons who are not able to register online, is there a phone number that they can call, or is there registration at the door?
Yes, there will be registration at the door.
Okay.
So that won't be a problem.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Perfect. Registration is open. It's this Saturday right here in our town, and I look forward to seeing all your faces there. Thank you. And thank you very much, Ambassador Simmons. Have fun with that. It's very appropriate. It's very appropriate.
Thank you,
Very
brother
appropriate.
council member.
Great way to start the day, folks. All right. Kimberly, are you ready? We can go back to item A. And then, you know, I noticed that public comments are at the end of this agenda.
I think that was a error, but there's no public
She had
comment.
asked already before you.
Was there anyone that was signed up or wanted to
Ever
speak?
asked.
You asked already. Okay, thank you. All right, this is very important. Item Item A, the restorative housing.
Just can, before Ms. Kimberly gives her report, can we just give a round of applause for the amount of applications that we got, over
Oh, yes.
600
Oh, yes.
in this
Thank you.
community?
Thank you.
Where, I mean, there was a lot of, leading up to it, a lot of concern and apprehension and
Yes.
anxiety.
Yes.
But to have that kind of an outpouring of application is excellent.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, and my apologies for rushing over that. That is very true. So here we are, we spend a lot of time with our staff, as well as our partner. I'd like to thank Bonnie, Claire for participating, Ambassador Simmons for her comments, and then there's also another staff member, Audrey Thompson, who was present. A lot of the areas of focus for these conversations with the agency that will help to provide a number of things. They're bringing the money to the table. They're also there to help keep the process organized, I guess, for lack of better words. And so for the committee members, whenever Kimberly's ready, we can have a discussion in the high points of what we've worked out, and then we'll listen to your feedback and move on. I just want to remind people, and I'll constantly do that this is just the 4% of the $10 million, and we can't spend what we don't have. So this is money that's budgeted and ready to go, and we'll be looking forward to awarding our first 16 and also being the first in the country to issue the repair. Kim, please.
This is kind of not part of the agenda, but I was downtown Evanston. Did I notice a new dispensary coming soon on Davis? So
I think I
that's,
saw it too.
is it? Yeah. So
I know
I say
how
that
to
to say
Yeah.
that as the dispensaries open up, the revenue will accelerate.
Absolutely.
Did I see
absolutely.
that? Was that accurate?
I
thought I
didn't.
saw a coming soon sign on,
So
Maybe
my
I'm
challenge
wrong.
that only because it's a special use.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a special use, so I think that we would have seen that. It may be, I mean, we'll get to
Okay.
that later,
It
but
had
I
a-
don't think
It
that.
had a marijuana kind of name, so maybe it's
It
paraphernalia
could be
or something.
CBD,
Okay.
it could be, there's so many variations of
Yeah.
things that are
Hemp?
legal
That's not
now.
marijuana?
No.
Hemp?
It was
No.
like
No.
hemp.
It could
No,
be
it could
hemp.
I'm sorry, I'm not into
No.
consumption of it, but I love the revenue.
You have to remember.
It's okay, it's legal now.
Yeah.
Edibles,
We have
gummies, all sorts of
different,
stuff.
remember the map we created that had the boundaries for where we could zoned for
Yeah.
where it's at? And so that would have to go back to severity type of,
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
yeah,
no, unless something has flipped by, I would think that
You would know.
we would know.
Mr. Zamazak would have shared that.
Yeah.
Either
yeah.
way, they're definitely coming.
There's definitely more
Yeah.
to come, to your point. All right. Can we want to tee up item A?
Yeah, so
Thank you.
per our discussion at our previous meeting, we had, we knew the numbers were going to end up on the higher end, and so we requested that could we start with the review of the ancestors? And so you all thankfully agreed, and so that's where we started. So of the 146 applications that were received, they were categorized as ancestors, and in those numbers, we have updated numbers because, as you may know, we have some outstanding, and what outstanding meant is they did not qualify either because they didn't provide any ID, government-issued ID, that had a picture ID with them, or that they did not provide the correct documentation. So over the course of the last couple of weeks, staff has reached out to those individuals to make sure that they knew that this information was missing and that they could provide it. Originally we had 23, now we are at 13 residents who are outstanding. So at some point, we are going to have to ask the question, when do we cut that off so we can move forward with the selection of the first 16? We did have 17 individuals who did not qualify. And the qualification, the reason for that inability to qualify was due to their age or due to incomplete information that once verified, they were still not qualified. So they were qualified as a direct descendant, not as a ancestor. But
Kimberly, how were they notified, or what was the process after they were disqualified?
we have not notified anyone yet,
Right.
other than those who have missing information that we can say.
Okay.
And these were definitive because you can't change your age. So at some point,
right.
we have to acknowledge that if we're going to stick to that age range, that those individuals, which were the majority of them, I mean, we had someone who was born in 1984 applying as an ancestor.
Yeah.
So we had to acknowledge that they were not qualified in this category. So what we will do for those individuals, once everyone has agreed to us cutting this off, we can then verify and say, if you qualify or you apply under ancestor, however, you should be qualified on direct descendant, would you please update your information so that we can then put you in the correct category? But that's a separate process, and that doesn't need to hinder moving forward with where we're at today with the ancestor categories being finalized.
So that reduction of numbers from 23 to the 13, did those 10 then were they all properly qualified, or they're amongst the, okay.
Yes. Yeah, because the information was ID and documents. And we knew the reason why we were comfortable that they were going to be verifiable was because it was literally everything matched. It's just they didn't have a picture ID. And so what we wanted to do is make sure we're consistent. So anytime, if someone ever wanted to come back and say, well, how did you do X? We can say everyone had the same information. So we knew they probably would be verifiable. It was just a matter of just getting the corrected information. Now, as for those additional that are outstanding still, we will need to do one final reach out. And we were discussing that possibly by phone, just to make sure those individuals, if they are not looking at email, that they have a follow-up phone call. But again, trying to move this along, how much time do you all want us to give to these last numbers of individuals who have not responded to our outreach?
So in thinking about that, can you be very specific about how you has it just been through repeated emails?
Correct.
Okay.
And keep in mind, all these things were submitted online.
Online.
So with
But-
resources at the library,
Yeah.
staff walking through it.
I think a phone call, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's shrunk.
Yeah.
I mean, and some people really responded immediately. Some people responded literally within a couple of minutes and a couple hours. So these 13 haven't responded at all. So we were going to reach out by phone, but we wanted to not,
Sure.
again, we needed your direction on when we should cut this off, because we want to be clear that this is not a staff decision
Right.
to stop the process, but we wanted to make sure we've given ample time for people to be notified.
You know, although the applications came in online, and so they would have had to have, some initial familiarity with it to do that, I can imagine scenarios where there was a lot of assistance, and we did offer assistance anticipating. We wanted to remove that barrier particularly for the age group, that qualify as ancestors. I could imagine a scenario where someone having gotten that assistance might not be regular, if they're living more independently or something like that, not regularly checking their email. So I think some kind of direct reach out, like a phone call, a voice, I think that would be, at this stage, definitely before we cut off some other means of outreach.
Are you
Certainly a phone
Yeah.
call, but I'm wondering if there are any sort of confidentiality reasons why you couldn't let us know the 13, since we have relationships with the community.
So we've been very, very, very protective of not sharing the names with
Okay.
you all.
Yeah, I think that's
So we will do our best to reach out in a method that we know that is achievable.
Okay.
Again, those who actually, in that instance, we had a couple people who it was their relative or friend email, and they even said, I am not such and such, but this is their information. So we have had that situation happen. But we will reach out and we will share with you all when we get to that point of, okay, we've now done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I think if I sent a letter, it's going to slow down the process
Sure.
because we can't depend on the
Agreed.
metal.
That was horrible.
So we'll figure out how best, we'll make a couple attempts. We're not just going to leave one call and say we're done.
Yeah.
We'll at least try to spread them out over a couple of days. But I just need a date
So I'm
certain.
going to give you a drop date. I'm asking the question, is this something that you can finish up by next week? I don't think we need to take this within the holidays, so if I'm looking
Okay.
at my calendar.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sooner
You
than
know,
later.
And then is there any way we can make a provision that since their application was in, it doesn't expire? If they get the notice late or something, would they still be able to bring up their documentation?
Well, that's going to be your decision of how you want to deal with these individuals who are non-responsive.
Right.
So I'll leave that to you all to give us that direction.
Well, I second the next week deadline for correspondence.
Yeah.
I mean, December 15th just sounds like a good date to give people because they may not be able to get back to you or you may not get them. You might need, so just, today is December 2nd.
Second.
That
By
would
the
give them in
15th.
13 days, almost 2 whole weeks.
Okay.
And that way it's fair, it's plenty of time. And I think we have to have a cutoff. I
Yeah.
mean, we have to say final date because everything else is dependent on this. So we don't want to drag it out too much longer.
I think even the 15th is, because we're getting like really into the holiday time, so it's not that they have not, there's been multiple emails that came in the same way that they communicated to us. So next week seems to be, you're going to make multiple phone calls. I think that we should consider next week instead
And
of
I'm also
going
thinking
further.
about the staff's time too, just
Okay.
because
Yeah, I
13
mean, it's-
people, trying to contact 13 people with all that they have to do. But, I'm flexible.
It's a
And I'm quickly open to both. I just want to, whatever we do for this group, it's only fair we do it for the next group in the next round when this happens.
Yeah.
So we should keep that in mind. If it's 2 weeks this time, it's got to be 2 weeks the
weeks,
next
yeah.
time.
Well, I would say with the direct descendants, because they are the majority of the
Seniors.
applications, you're going to probably need more time because I have a feeling that that group is going to require us to
I
really
agree.
have
There's a lot of
to
them.
do another round of check-ins because the majority of that number is the direct descendants. So that's going to be a Herculean process to verify.
Well, I second Alderman Braithwaite's recommendation for next week, Friday, like a week from tomorrow.
Okay.
Can I very guiltily add another suggestion here? Is mindful of your time, et cetera, but because after the deadline, some people may be cut off, I would not rely on a letter, but I might send out a letter saying, we have made these different,
That's actually a great idea.
attempts to notify you.
That's a really good
And,
idea.
so that they are, there you go.
So if
paper
you're going
trail.
to do a letter, you need to extend that to the 15th. Because there's no way we
No,
can get a letter.
No, not necessarily a letter I'm not suggesting a letter to reach out for the contact. I'm not hopeful for that because of the vagaries in the mail system these days, et cetera. But I do think that if we're not able to make contact with the 13 and then someone is cut off in the deadline, a letter then saying, we attempted on these days to contact you, and you'll be moved
Got it.
into,
The direct descendant.
just to be clear
Oh, yeah,
and
move
let
them into
people
direct
know.
descendant. That
Yeah.
way they're not out of
They
the,
would
Right.
be moved into the direct descendant.
Right.
Because, the ancestors were prioritized.
Right.
But we
Yes.
acknowledge that they lived here. So they would be pushed into the direct descendant.
Okay.
that's great. That way they're not,
That's definitely
yeah.
better than not in it
And
at
just
all.
let people, so that you have just drop the dates in of your emails, and maybe by that time you try to call a few times. We tried to do these things.
Yeah. And everyone, so per our guidelines, all applicants will receive a letter of some sort. So one's going to be receiving a letter saying, you have been verified as an ancestor and will be a part of the
Yeah.
selection process. Another letter is going to say, due to these criteria, you do not meet the ancestor category. However, you are able to submit for a direct descendant with these X, Y, and Z requirements. And then the last being, we attempted to reach out to you to verify through these methods of communication and had not heard back from you from at this date. If unable to provide by date certain, whatever that is, you will be moved into the direct descendant category, but we still need you to reach out to us to verify that this application is valid.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think just to avoid confusion and let people know,
Okay.
we did do these things.
And then we have
So-
the direct, then we have the direct descendants that we do need to probably send something to them, say, hey, we did receive your application. However, we are prioritizing the ancestors first. Please be patient. And once we get to the direct descendants, we will be notifying that process when that verification process begins.
Right. So now that we have a deadline for the 10th, and we have our group of names per our ordinance and the way we wrote this up in the past, can we then put those names, move those names forward to our December 13th city council meeting for approval? Not the names themselves, but I guess
The
their
numbers.
ID numbers is what we discussed previously.
So do we need to, I don't think we need to do that. I think all you need is to approve the budget, not approve, because the budget was approved.
The budget was,
I mean,
yeah,
the-
that was approved.
So approve the amount
Right.
that, or to approve the process. So we can say we have 16, we now are moving forward. We have 100, we have X amount of people. We're going to select the 16 out of that. And this council can vote to, as an action, as a resolution or something to acknowledge those 16 will be selected at a future date. I'm just,
I guess my
Why
recommendation
wouldn't
would
we,
then just,
like a bills list?
well,
We
not
talked
even
about that.
not even a bills list, but just put it on put it on Administrative Public Works and just accept and put it on file.
Because it's already.
Because,
been
yeah, there's not an
approved.
action
So
item.
we're-
You're correct.
We're implementing what's been approved already.
Correct.
So it's just
Yeah.
a transaction at this point.
correct.
Does it have to be done is, I guess.
I
Well,
mean,
that's-
president doesn't have to be done.
Well, that's,
So just
I would
Because-
make-
bills list.
Because even
Right.
once the person is receiving so here's what happened. So back in April, there was discussion that we need to approve this, we need to take final action on this, the 16. That was the discussion at the council level in April. So I guess the question, the council wants to be the final action of these, so we have to probably pull first and then submit to council.
16.
The 16.
Ah.
So we're
16,
gonna
not
have
all
to
of
do
them.
that first.
Wait a second. Because we talked about this, like you said, in the last committee, and it is the commitment has been made by a council action that we have committed to doing this as a city. So at this point, it's a bills list item. So I want to be clear on what you're saying needs further approval, other than approving the budget as we do any other financial line item.
So, but the way that this is going to be implemented, it's not just gonna be a bills list, because you're going through probably, we are gonna have to go through another entity to disperse this, to manage the disbursement. So they're gonna get the bill back. Per the guidelines, the council takes the final action before disbursement occurs.
Right,
That's
that happens on a bills list. I'm wondering what
This, but
additional.
the bills list, the action,
well, why would it go through the bills list if
It wouldn't go
SEPA,
through the-
it wouldn't
it
go
wouldn't
through
go
the
to the-
seals,
it wouldn't go
because
to the bills
SEPA's
list.
managing the funds. just to-
so that's where I'm trying to say, you all need to pull the 16 and go to city council.
With the 16.
And then let the city council say, these are the 16 that we are going to be providing funds with. And then they're done, they're out of the process. The council no longer has to take any further action.
So I
It's in
think
the
that's.
rules, let me read it
Yeah,
from
pull
what
the rules, and while
say.
you're sharing, just something for the committee to consider. I think we assign the funds to SEPA because they're going to be,
When was that discussed?
the MOU we've been discussing with SEPA for the past 2-3 months.
No,
until-
I mean, did we, I hear you. Right.
Okay, so yeah, we'll discuss it. We'll definitely. But just while we're on this subject, my thought is, rather than send the names for our city council to approve, that in terms of a process moving forward, that doesn't make sense to me, just in the simple fact that if someone, for some crazy reason, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in 4 years, was to say no to a name, that compromises all of our efforts. So I think if we're looking at our current situation with the first 16 that represents the first 4% of the funds, is that we'll authorize the transfer of those funds to the entity that then is bringing the money
Dispersing the
to
money.
each institution, if that makes sense, if everyone's tracking with what I'm saying.
And I apologize, I'm on the edge of being lost. So,
Okay?
will the council ever approve actual names, or haven't we
That's what she's
allotted
pulling up the
numbers?
rules.
Yeah, I
Haven't
think
we
they're
allotted
numbers.
numbers so that they remain
Yeah.
anonymous? Is that a yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't think we were supposed to, I thought the names were supposed to be announced after
That is
after
correct.
action was supposed to be
That is
taken.
correct. So we're just trying to figure out what we need council approval for. So that's the
All right,
clarity that we're
so-
seeking now.
Sorry.
And I don't know that you guys could get that all for us today, because I think it sounds like it's something that hasn't been really determined.
You
can
are
determine it
correct
now.
Oh,
That's
we
what we're-
can? Okay.
Yeah. And the reason that we're having the discussion now is because this is our last meeting for the year. So if there's an action that needs to take place, I'm trying to bring that clarity to the conversation. And for members of our public and anyone who's listening at home, I want to thank you for your engagement. We're now into the weeds of the distribution. And so we want to be very careful and meticulous that we're not missing any steps to ensure that we have a really good, clean process that everyone can understand. Thank you.
Okay, so per page 10 of the guidelines, it states, section 9, disbursement process.
Yep.
Upon approval by city council, funds will be dispersed electronically or via check to closing agent for dispersal when an applicant closes on a home purchase, to the contractor upon receipt of invoice, or to the lender for mortgage payment.
So it's approval.
Yeah, but approval that's what we're discussing right now. What level of approval beyond approving the allocation of this first?
I mean, it says upon approval, the disbursement can occur. So that's why I'm asking, do we, oh no, I have to think through this.
No, it's not, I mean, so
yeah.
it says right there, upon city council approval, we're talking about what is city council approving
Approving.
other than this first allocation? Because we passed it in March of 2021, we passed in November of 19. So other than the city council saying, like they do anything else, okay, we're building this park, we're approving these funds, we're moving forward on this action, what more is there for them to approve?
I don't know, I can't answer that question.
And,
Let's decide
and
now.
I don't know, part of the confusion too, because I'm remembering one of the things staff was trying to work on was how to make sure this wasn't seen as income. And I don't know if that's the thing where if we
That's
put it on
why
the
we have
bills
a-
list and it's like, all right, we're giving 25K to this individual, then we run into that issue,
There's a
And
lot
we're-
of,
yeah.
there's a
Moving
lot of
pieces.
Sounds
that.
like stuff in the weeds.
a part of it.
So
but-
can I make a suggestion to our staff, just so we move forward? So obviously Nick is not here. And then if we need to take further action, I think we're all committed to moving this forward. If we can leave ourselves open to a virtual meeting at some point, once we get clarity, obviously we're not going to be able to solve this issue now, right?
I don't know why we can't. She
But-
just read the rules. We're all here appointed to do the work.
I
I
agree.
don't.
I think
I-
we should be able to get to a consensus. Are you
Right.
comfortable with us moving this to council or not? I guess the question. Do
The
we need-
question is,
Well,
what are we moving
Move
to council?
That's what we
And
have to do.
I think what you have to move to council is the SEPA agreement, because they're the one that's going, if the committee agrees to this process of bringing SEPA as a third party to disperse, then they're the ones that's dispersing the dollars, not, they're indirectly not the city. The city is funding it, but they're the ones dispersing it. And so then they would have to take that action, but we are not close to even bringing it to committee to even have that conversation to go to council.
So
We're
it's
not
the
close to
cart
bringing
before
what
the
to committee?
horse.
The conversation around SEPA disbursement.
Yeah, it seems like that should have been brought up for introduction long before
Well, we
now.
have to,
We're
well,
still working
it's
through
like
the,
everything, here's the thing, this is, like,
I don't think
anything
it's supposed
else
to be
is-
done before it comes to committee.
Well, we've been talking about this since April. This has not just started
Right.
today. But at the end of at the direction that I was given, we need to figure out how to disperse funds. We can discuss SEPA the next step, but I guess the question is, do we just wait and have that all together package to go to council? That means you will have to wait till January.
Well, it has to pass committee before it goes to council, or
so
no?
let's, if we can pause for a second, because I see a lot of, we're having two separate conversations, right? The first question is, what, if anything, needs council approval? And so if there's nothing that needs council approval, then we're green-lighted to move to the next step.
Correct.
So we've established the fact that there's nothing in terms between now and when the funds are dispersed that needs council approval. So that's the first thing. Everybody clear? Everybody clear in public? Okay, let's say it again. Just
No,
'cause
he
it-
heard
No,
you,
no, I
but
know.
it's just
If-
not what Kimberly just said.
So-
I do think we need, it would have to be helpful to have council comments and somebody else just be clear of that, because it seems like there's a few moving parts. Question I have though is, with SEPA,
I don't want to move there yet
Real
until we
quick,
get
'cause-
to the council.
but real quick, because something that Kimberly just said, is, would SEPA be dispersing also to the lender or
So-
only to the contractor? I just want to be clear on that.
We're talking about two different things, and I don't
We're
want to be.
talking about the same thing.
No, I don't want to be
Right.
argumentative, but I want to make it clear that the first step that we're in, a lot of moving pieces, is there anything that requires council approval? The reason that we're trying to get that question answered is we only have one date in December. So if we don't have anything that needs council approval, and again, if between this action and when you circle back with Nick because he isn't here, then I would like to leave it open for us to have a virtual meeting.
It's
We're moving with the
disbursement.
assumption
It's
that,
disbursement. So they
That's
don't
it.
approve the
We're not at
name,
disbursement.
they approve the disbursement. And so we have to go back to council with
One-
the disbursement. It's, as it says, upon approval by city council, funds will be dispersed. So we can't do anything until council approves the disbursement.
Right.
They approved the budget, but they did not approve us to actually spend the money. They just approved the budget.
Just like any other dollar that leaves out of here goes to a city council vote, right?
Correct.
Like I've been
Right.
saying. So if we have established that part and we understand. Is it going to a bills list? Is it still for discussion of SEPA? You saying that we've been discussing this since April, but we haven't discussed it.
so
Because
allow
we
me.
want-
We've been hinting at it and making the
can-
suggestion, but
Yeah. So can I just step back and why? So that part we understand. Disbursement is really that's what I'm looking for, the action from council, not the approval of the names, it sounds like. So
Right.
we're not asking to approve the names, we're asking them to approve the disbursement to those individuals.
That's what that said. isn't
And that's what that read.
That is clear.
So the question then next is who's dispersing the funds?
Right.
Is it city doing it directly or is it going to be through a third party?
Right.
well,
And-
the rules you just read said the city was doing
No,
it.
Well, the city
City's approving.
approves it, but we don't have to disperse. The city could have a designee, it doesn't, like we have of other programs. And so I am going to be honest, we do not have the capacity
Right.
to do this program as an
Right.
administrative staff to disperse funds.
Right.
And in talking with Councilmember Braithwaite, Chair
Right.
Braithwaite, about how do we move forward in a way that we can ensure that especially our ancestors are being taken care of in a way that they're not going to be harmed because we as staff don't have either the expertise nor do we have the time that needs to be invested to ensure funding is getting to the appropriate individuals and that they're not going to be in any harms in relate to the projects that they may end up selecting. We've had a relationship with SEPA who has done housing and continue to do housing programs in partnership with the city. It was a natural partnership to come with to the committee. We have been working with SEPA to figure out what is it that we need them to do. So I cannot answer your question, Councilmember Burns, because we're still trying to figure that out, because there may have to be some form of a cost.
But that's what you have a committee for,
But-
to help with that discussion.
But that
So-
conversation is directed by the chair. The chair tells me how he wants that to be.
Right.
Well, we should have committee discussions when we're having these types of exclusive agreements with organizations so that we can share in the discussion. So I think the only thing that's left pending now is a discussion about SEPA. It sounds like we've agreed on the process. We don't have much council action left other than the approval of the specific dollars or the names, and that the only thing pending is this fiduciary relationship, and that's what we should be discussing.
So thank you. First, I want to recognize that we have corporate counsel, Nicholas Cummings, with us. We had a previous discussion prior to you walking into the room regarding council approval and steps towards issuing. So that's the first thing. So I'm glad that you're here. Kimberly just read the rules. And then the second question we'll answer is the MOU and the relationship with entity to help us to deliver the first repair. So those are two separate issues, as I stated in the beginning, and as soon as we put to rest the council issue, we can back into the second issue. Is everyone on the same page? Thank you.
So I guess the first question that I have, since I did come in late, is the expectation is that the funding would be approved by council in one lump sum? Or would it be?
Disbursement. So as it was written, which
We're seeking clarification now that we're at that point. Correct.
disbursement. So is it tied to the SEPA? If we end up going with SEPA, is it tied to their MOU? Then
So the way that I understand this the Section 9 to be written is that the committee will have selected applicants.
Correct.
X number of applicants equals X number of dollars. That disbursement would need to be approved by council, and then all the other work, administrative work, will be handled under the MOU.
Okay.
Does the MOU need any type of action, or can that happen as an administrative action? Just so that we know, if it's an administrative decision and the chair made the decision, we can move past it. If we need to take an action, then that's what we should have on a future agenda.
that's what we're trying to figure out.
That's
why
what
we
we're
have to
having a
bring it to committee,
discussion.
Because if there's a cost to it, it's gonna have to go to the city council because of the threshold for which that cost can't be above. If there isn't a cost, then it's an administrative action.
So we talked about this, and we all, anyway, we talked about it. I remember consensus of us saying that the reparations fund, as a committee, we had consensus that the reparations fund would be used for direct benefits and not for program
costs.
administrative costs.
I never said the reparations
Yeah.
was used. I said if there's a cost.
Just walking back through the process, since we're here now. And so
Sure.
that was something
Sure.
that I remember. And then if there is a cost, and it's gonna be, I remember discussion distinctly that the possible fiduciary, in this case, what is it, SEPA,
FIPA.
would possibly identify funds or raise funds as their own entity or nonprofit to be able to support
No,
us in this way.
that was never part of the conversation.
I remember hearing
It
that,
was,
so maybe
no, I will agree that was discussed.
Yeah.
However, that has, as we evolve and try to figure out what we exactly are looking for them to do, when you start getting into the weeds, you realize there's more work behind this than you think of just handing someone, cutting a check.
Right.
So that's where we're trying to figure out what that cost will look like, if there is a cost. SEPA, in full transparency, said we want to be a partner in this in some form or fashion. We will gladly be able to do disbursement, but as we are looking at project management with certain projects for seniors who may not have any background in construction management, there's some things in there that SEPA has a history of providing a service for. So we are trying to figure out what that looks like and what our expectations of SEPA is so they can give us, if they're in need for a dollar amount, we can then fundraise, or they can fundraise to get that money to offset that cost. But until we know what that dollar amount is, I can't say if the city's gonna pay for it out of other funds or if we're gonna get outside donors to pay for that cost. But that's what we're trying to work through right now.
Have they given you a cost? Because that's
No.
for them to
No.
determine, not us.
No.
I'm sorry, I know the public comment was questioned before, but who is CEPA?
So allow us to dial back and how did we get
Because
here?
from our understanding as
I-
a community,
I understand.
we believed that it was going to be the community.
We understand your,
Decided who was going to
right.
be first. Who's
Thank
CEPA?
you, thank you,
Never
thank
heard
you,
of them. Who are
thank
That's,
you.
that's inaccurate.
Yeah, that is inaccurate. So if we can just focus, Ms. Indo, I know, we understand your question, and it's in this conversation that we're clarifying that. And so I want to be respectful to those that are here, and the only time that the public is asked to speak is during public comment. So I'm going to ask you one more time, we hear your question. So here's how we got there, and this is an important conversation to have. Throughout the process, and this conversation took place 2 meetings ago, I shared with Kimberly that we're really going into the weeds. And I think, Claire, I'm going to ask you, because you shared a statistic in terms of the harm to seniors that started us down this path. And if you can share that statistic of the harm towards seniors, I can't remember, I should have written it down.
So what, and I'm sorry, I don't have the actual
That-
number.
that's fine.
And it was,
Right.
for this year. But when we look at the crime of financial exploitation,
Thank you.
there is it's something like between 80 to 90% are aimed at the elderly. And so with that in mind, and unfortunately, a lot of the financial exploitation comes from people who are familiar with them. So with that in mind, we're trying to put some things in place and be mindful that with these people our ancestors don't become vulnerable to financial exploitation with the award of the money, that's actually used to benefit them in the way that they choose, that we're not coming back with road contractors with some, mechanics liens and whatever, coming out of this process. So we're trying to put, being aware of people's dignity and independence and so forth, but also trying to give them the resources. So not babysitting them, but trying to give people the resources so that they can, that they can use this in the way their plans can actually come to fruition, and try to put some safeguards and things in place against the
Yeah.
financial exploitation.
Thank you so much.
I'm hearing two different things,
part of-
though.
Can I
like
just finish
one,
the statement, please?
Capacity of staff, and then
Right, so I
concerns
wanna
from
finish-
seniors, financial wellness. And I think if we had first of all, if it's an administrative action, then this could have happened without this discussion. But if it is gonna need a legislative or some sort of council or committee action, then it would be difficult to even continue this discussion without the MOU. Understanding, is it mandatory that they go through SEPA? I mean, some ancestors are fully competent to manage their own improvements. Those are the types of things that I think would be helpful if we're gonna have this discussion and give any sort of support of the MOU. And that would just make it really easy if we had access to it.
So this is what I was explaining, and I'm going to try to do it again without interruption. 2 meetings ago, I brought it up, and I specifically pointed to Mr. Sutton, and I said, pretty much summarizing Claire's point, anyone that has been involved with a construction project, whether locally or someone you know, there are so many opportunities for conflict in terms of expectations of work that we all have experienced at some times or the other if you've been involved with that. And so our attempt, and we've talked about, utilizing an organization like SEPA, and I said, we're going to, myself, Claire, I asked for Claire and Bonnie to meet to start to put together the criteria that would then come back to our committee. As we started this conversation, it turned into, a lot of details that we need to be consider those that we want to take responsibility for and those that we don't want to create any barriers. We've had a series of 1, 2, 3 conversations that last an hour long with 2 senior professionals, including Audrey Thompson and also with Kimberly and the members of SEPA. We haven't even gotten to the point where it's flushed out to bring it to legal and then to our committee. So that's the conversation. That's where we are right now. And so I know, Nick, you wanted to say something, but again, if those details were lost with the committee, we're not taking on action before it comes to the committee. What we're saying is the cake isn't even half baked yet to give you something to read to take action on. Is that pretty? Well, before we get into another round of questions, Nick, did you? That's so.
I was going to let Kimberly.
Okay.
So the committee partners for affordable housing is SEPA. I think that was the question I was asked. What is the acronym? SEPA stands for Community Partners for Affordable Housing. I initially reached out to SEPA because I needed someone to help me with disbursement. And it literally was, can you just be the person to cut the check to give to the financial institutions and to the vendor? Like, I was thinking very naively, like, all I need you to do is administrative action. We will give you the names, we will do all the application processes, we will take care of the back end, but you will be the one as the fiduciary partner to cut the check. Again, the reason why is because we cannot manage making sure that we are getting vendors paid on time or if someone's checking up with the vendor. We don't have the same type of relationship with the financial institutions like SEPA would have to make sure that the correct mortgage payment is getting paid in the way that the individual has requested. We started talking about construction management because I went through SEPA's previous program with the city, and I said, well, would that be a nice option? For people who may not want to do it on their own, could we look at an option to where if they chose that they would say, you know what, this may be a little bit out of my scope of knowledge, I want someone to help me. We had a partner already there ready to be able to provide that assistance. And then the conversation continued to go on about, well, there are some other things that we may want as a benefit to those beneficiaries that SEPA provides. They could also provide those benefits to them on their own. That's not something the city is requesting. And so we wanted to flesh out and provide the committee with a very clear proposal of what the expectations is of the city, what the expectation is of SEPA, so the community members would be educated. And if there needs to be an administrative action or a city council action, the committee can then make that determination. No, nothing has been set in stone. No one has signed off anything. The original administrative MOU that we had has been trashed because originally it was literally, could you just help us cut this check because administratively we need someone to do that on our behalf. So we hadn't brought it to your attention yet as a committee. I mean, maybe the chair has reached out to you individually because we wanted to flesh it out so we can give you something to think about and then we can make some final decisions. But I can tell you, if you saw where we started and where we are today, at a committee level, I don't think we've gotten this done this quickly to get us to somewhere where we can begin the process of actual disbursement at the beginning of the year. And I think if we go through a committee process the way that our committees are structured, this would have dragged out for many, many months. And so we're trying to accelerate this so we can get something in front of you. It will be in a packet. People will have an understanding of what the expectations are. Nothing that we're going to do, even if it's administrative, will not happen without you as the committee having some part or some action towards it, even if it doesn't require the city council action. So I just want to be clear, we weren't prepared to talk about SEPA today, so that's why I did not have it on the committee, on the agenda. But when that time comes, our hope is to bring SEPA here so you can ask them questions and to also get a clear understanding of what those expectations are. But that was not meant to be today's meeting, and so I apologize that we kind of went down that, but I think it's also very fair for you all to know where it's going on and to relate to that as well.
And if Robin and Chair Braithwaite, if you guys recall, when we were a subcommittee, there was discussion about staff, the necessity of city staff in order to administer the program.
Correct.
Need a program manager, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have that, right? And so SEPA, being an organization that has, resources and history
All that is clear.
in doing that, that's one of the reasons why they even got involved.
Is it black leg?
Right, and so here, this is the only reason why I think there's this much discussion is that
Because it's not free.
Ms. Sindona,
determined-
I'm going to
it's pretty much
respect,
determined-
Ms.
it's determined
Simmons,
who
can you
it
hold
is.
1 second, please, just so we can take control of the meeting? Ms. Sindona, I'm going to say it right now with all due respect. In terms of all of our committees, and you've attended many of them, I'm not going to tolerate like the outbursts from the public when we're trying to conduct business. I know, dear, but if you choose, we can either ask you, I'm going to ask you one more time to either lower your voice and just wait until we're finished, and I'm more than happy to have a discussion afterwards. But if you continue to have an outburst, I'll ask you to leave, and if you don't choose to leave, then we'll close this meeting. I'm not going to have this. Thank you.
This is just my last comment on it, and completely respect. We've always, expected that there would be a capacity challenge and talked about a designated staff person. I used the example of NSP2 and Jolene Saul, or whatever it's going to be. I think just that we haven't had a robust conversation, named who it was, talked about any details of an MOU. When there was an introduction about compensation or some sort of financial agreement, we had a consensus that we didn't support that. So I think just more information would be necessary. And then if there is going to be some sort of compensation and they're not doing it as a nonprofit partner, then there's probably going to need to be a lot more discussion about it. So I just think that this dialogue is premature because we don't have enough information in front of us. But the way that it was thrown out there, like SEPA and the MOU, without enough information, it's just difficult to move forward in the conversation.
Mr. Burns?
Just 2 questions. I just want to confirm, both the MOU and the disbursement would have to be approved by city council.
Not the MOU.
So, because we've approved MOUs, I think, before, didn't we just approve MOU?
If it'd be attached, it's usually attached to a certain amount of funding when you have a memorandum of understanding.
Okay.
But typically, if it's just an exchange in services, it's the city manager's office and the entity that
So
will
just the
do that.
disbursement then, in this case?
The dollar amount,
The
yes.
dollar amount, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
That's-
Are there any other questions on the topic?
And to be clear, it's not as if we're asking this partner to make any sort of decisions. That's your job as the committee.
Correct.
This partner is handling the administrative functions that the staff would normally handle in an NSP with ARPA, with other federal funds that we receive. But this committee has already said we're not funding any sort of administrative fees with reparations fund money. So we don't have staff to do it. So we got to get somebody else to do it because we need someone to do it. But they're not making any decisions. They're literally the administrative wheel. Whoever that might be will be the administrative wheel to help us turn this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the committee?
Yeah, I just have a concern that, I'm glad we're having this discussion, but I'm more
Sure.
concerned about our credibility as a committee to effectively have the community's concerns dealt with at this particular forum. And if there are all questions like who's going to be doing distributor, will they be verified? I think we should have the ability to settle those issues right here, so I can go back to the community, because I am being bombarded now about what are y'all doing and you don't know what you're doing. And we need some clarity, and we also need to move forward. First, the people who have been selected on the 16th, will they be given a letter that they notification that they've been accepted?
Yes.
Second, those people who have not given the documentation, will they be given a second letter saying either we received this verification or a response saying we now have the verification?
We confirm when people provide us verification. If they're non-responsive, what I heard from today, we will follow up with a phone call and we will send out another notice via mail
With the deadline of,
with the deadline of
December 10th.
the 10th. So, yes, yes.
Okay.
So Chair, to your question, do we not need to or not take any city council action, or we're not at that point?
So we're not at that point, and our goal is to finalize just the details of everything that we've discussed here in a document that we will then bring back to the committee to review. And so for members of the committee, also for those in the audience and those that would listen, this is a function of just local government. There's always a lot of hands that go into a product before we bring it before the public. So this is no different than anything else that we do. And so as soon as we finalize those details, we'll then bring it to the committee. And just before the committee sees it, it will be in a public packet for everyone to read. And then you can come prepared to whatever that next meeting date is with your questions and comments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
Thank
can I
you.
just be clear? It took us almost a year to create a guideline, a program policy document.
Right.
It took staff literally 3 to 4 months to get us ready for the application process.
Right.
The most critical part of this is disbursement.
Right.
And so we're trying to take our time and do it right.
Exactly.
So
Thank
we're trying to measure twice, cut once in this scenario. And so again, because we have not made a lot of comments about it publicly, because we weren't sure if that was the direction we should go into until we
Correct.
started having additional conversations. And, again, keeping the chair in the loop of all those conversations. So this may slow us down a little bit because we do need to do this right. And I think patience is asked, and we will continue to be transparent when decisions are being made. No decisions have been made. All we're trying to do is just identify the appropriate partner that will help us with a housing program that we don't have internally administrative staff to be able to support.
and so we've always supported that. I think the difference and the concern here is that, and it took staff a year, but it also had a lot of touches and feedback from the reparations subcommittee at that time. We saw it, it was a working document, it went back and forth, all that is in public record. So all we're saying now is that the same courtesy is, and responsibility to this committee, in fact, is necessary. We are appointed by the mayor to oversee and give direction and come to a consensus on what we're gonna do in response to what we're hearing from the community. So the only thought is that we have an opportunity to review or give feedback on a document. We already established we don't support the reparation fund funding, the whoever's gonna manage it. We never determined that it wouldn't be a designated staff person. This sounds like it could be the best case scenario, but more about who the organization is. We're hearing the community doesn't know who the organization is. If they're gonna be compensated, why is it sole source? Why isn't, these are questions that we're gonna have to leave here and respond to these questions after this meeting.
I understand, and that's why this was not being brought up to the committee until
But
those questions
how did we
being.
get into this robust discussion about it? And it's not-
Because you continue to question it. So I just want to say.
A SEPA and an MOU, I have a
I
responsibility.
didn't, but here's what I would say to you, Committee Member Simmons. I take this responsibility very highly seriously.
As we all
Everybody here
do.
does, so.
I also am not just a staff person. I am the number 2 person in this organization. So I am going to ensure that anything that's coming out of the city manager's office is going to be excellent work, not just good work. So I will not come to you all with half-baked information so you cannot deliberate on it. As I did you the courtesy as chair, I am doing the same courtesy with our current chair. He is giving me the direction, and I'm following the direction given to me. I am communicating to the committee. How the chair chooses to do that communication, be it a committee's level or a one-on-one level, I leave it up to the chair to make that determination.
Okay.
But the one thing I am going to do, I'm going to continue to do excellent work for you all, and I'm going to continue to make sure the community feels that they are being heard and that we are being responsive to their needs and making sure whoever those community partners are that we are partnered with are going to do this job correctly and are going to do this job with dignity and respect to those community members. So I will hold that being my responsibility, but I will continue to communicate with the committee, and I have communicated with the committee through this entire process.
Thank you very much, Kimberly.
Can I just interject as well? I understand that that there's a balance between keeping people informed and in the loop, but also there's some point, there have been some things that we've brought up, that we've had in these discussions that, upon going back with different stakeholders, we've amended, discarded, revised, and I think that it needs to be in a more finished product to be brought to this forum. Otherwise, I think there might be a lot of confusion. I could imagine someone attending a meeting and then, us moving on and for some reason changing something, and then there's a lot of confusing information that gets out there. And I just want to, the timeline, of course, it would be preferable if we had all of this synced up so that this disbursement could just happen immediately and so forth. But the care that has to go into it and the work that has gone into it, I can say it's not that people are dragging their feet or, there's different research and things that have come back about what's worked and what hasn't, and a lot of moving parts to bring together. And so it really is just premature to bring, I also share your desire to keep the community informed, but it's such a changing animal at this time. I think that some of those things would be confusing, and some of that confusion might lead to a lot of distrust and disappointment unnecessarily. So.
And I want to thank you for your comments. And just to move us forward again, I'm going to, if I have to say it 3 times, this is no different than anything else that we do as a part of local government. And so the document that we final draft will come before us in draft format. It will appear in a public agenda that not only members of the committee will have an opportunity to read and assess, but as well as members of the community. So I don't want anyone to leave here with a thought or suspicion that all of a sudden, as we're getting closer to this, that we're doing something outside of order or procedure. And I want to be crystal clear with that. And so I'm looking forward to, Kimberly, hopefully in the next, we'll finalize this, and then we will bring it forward for everyone to look at, and then we start the whole process over with a document that's hopefully well worded.
So are we selecting the individuals before we bring the, so what's the next steps that we need to be preparing ourselves for? Should I be focusing on getting this draft completed, ready for discussion at our next committee meeting? Or are we going to have some meeting in between to select individuals, or are we going to do that all at the next meeting?
I think just in an interest of time, we're already, and we'll put those 2 items on our agenda.
Yeah, I have some flexibility.
And then it's properly noticed that we're having those conversations, since, if we have to slow down, then we'll just slow down and make sure that everyone's on board. And so let's put those 2 on the next agenda for January.
January 6th.
Right.
Another special meeting?
No,
or we're
no.
next month?
We'll slow this thing down, and we'll make sure that everybody's walking and we're locking step. And we'll put those 2 items on the agenda. And then wherever we are with the criteria that we're discussing to keep our seniors safe, we'll bring that as well.
Okay.
We're not going to have this confusion again.
So can I
Thank you.
extend that deadline then, since we're walking? So do we need to have the 10th be the drop dead? Can we go to the
Correct.
15th? Okay.
That's an action that we've already voted on.
Okay.
And I think having some other options, I mean, SEPA I like SEPA. We're working with them often in the community, but I think we can't, and I don't think anybody is at fault here. It's just somewhat new information, new organization has been selected. Nonprofits are nonprofits, but they employ people, right? And they also can use programs to get other funds, right? So as SEPA, being the premier disperser of reparations funds, strengthens their organization so they can go out and seek other funding and grants, and their organization grows and they employ people and they determine who they employ. This is the reality of how this works. And so I think also the concern is, are there other organizations, potentially Black-led organizations or organizations that have a commitment to diverse hiring? Maybe that's SEPA, but I just want to be clear here that the concern is not the process. The process makes total sense. We need somebody to do the disbursement. I think have we determined, yes, it's SEPA? Have we looked outside of SEPA at other options, both here locally but also regionally? I think those are some of the questions that I'll get at the next, Fifth Ward meeting. So I don't think anybody's at fault here. It makes total sense, the decision that was made. Have we decided on SEPA, or are there some other options that we can explore?
Right. And I don't mind responding to that. First of all, there was no decision made, and I want to be clear about that. There was no decision made, right? And to correct your language, we wouldn't be able to go out for an RFQ if we don't have all the information in terms of what's important. And so rather than dwell on SEPA or any other organization, the work that we've been doing is making sure that we put the parameters in safe so that when we do make the award, those that are awarded, that it's successful. So as soon as you,
SEPA that it was in draft form and now it's being redrafted is an example template. I mean, it's just like we're gonna get this response, so I have to have answers.
sure, so the answer is we're working on criteria. We haven't made a decision. So the criteria of the project management to make sure that those that are awarded are provided. I don't want to make it, I'm sorry, because if I can I finish my statement? I think it's important that I'll finish it because we're having a hypothetical discussion over something that we haven't even seen, that's not even on the agenda. So I said it, that we will have both items on the agenda in January, and it will appear in draft form, and then we can move forward with the discussion.
But Chair, respectfully, because we're talking about language, an MOU and an RFQ is different. This is the first time that you said RFQ. That is a different process. Yes, it is.
Okay, so
That
if I
is a
said
different
RFQ,
process.
take that off the, I said,
A request for qualification makes sense, right? You go out in the community, we want SEPA or anybody else that thinks they can handle a process of dispersing this to give us, it's called a request for qualification. That's something that can go out to not just SEPA, but any organization, and they can submit their qualifications, and then we would make a decision based on that. I understand the process, but that's different than drafting an MOU with SEPA. So that's different, respectfully. So I'm saying I'm open to either one. We could do RFQ, we could do an MOU with SEPA. I'm just saying it's important to know what we're going to come back and discuss in January. That's all I'm saying. I'm open to
I
both.
take ownership of I take ownership of the MOU because it was an administrative decision on my end to find someone to disperse the funds who had a relationship with banks, and it was only based on who I can get to, who I knew the city already had an existing relationship with, that all I had to do was just attack on this, and they were not asking for funds or asking for any type of reimbursement for their services. They did not ask, they asked for nothing. And so it was literally my administrative decision working with our then city manager. Once I informed the chair about this, he and I had a separate conversation, and then questions started popping up that made me realize we needed to slow this down, and then that's when this conversation became broader. So I will take ownership of the MOU conversation because I literally just saw it as a transactional partnership that they were not charging the city for, and no one would have a clue because it's behind the scenes. It literally was just cut the check for us. But that ended up not being the case. So I recognize the time, but I just want to be clear. It was not the chair, it was myself who had that original MOU in place, but that has now been scrapped, and we're starting from a different place than we were then.
And just so the community's aware, we do direct negotiations, right? So I've talked to Luke, Dave Stoneback and other people who run these type of processes. If we think an organization is that good and they just meet all the qualifications. We don't have to go out for an RFQ, RFP, any of that. We can do a direct negotiation. So all of this is in bounds. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's important for us to know as a committee how we're moving forward and what
Can
we're
I
going to
just-
discuss, at the
Yeah.
next meeting.
And before we adjourn this meeting, I just want to address Mr. Sutton's concerns about the community. And I think as a committee, we do need to be aware of that, people thinking that maybe we don't have a plan and that we're not going forward. In our last meeting, we talked about how important it was to do this right. And the
did.
fact that we were not going to adhere or be able to adhere to the guidelines or the date, the timeline that we had before for disbursement of funds. And I want to just kind of echo what Kimberly is saying about patience, because, I mean, this is the first time ever in America we have done this. And so it's not going to go just smoothly according to the norm. There is no norm. And so I just want to ask the community, our neighbors, the Evanston people of African American descent, to be patient, to know that we are working hard to make this right, because haste makes waste. Thank you.
Well said. And on that, seeing no other items for discussion in front of us, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.